afternoon, everybody. Happy NearCon. Do a quick round of introductions, starting with Mike.
Hi, I'm Mike Perry. I have been at the Tor project for almost 2 decades now. I've worked on all sorts of things, Tor browser and Tor VPN threat models, and I'm a technical product manager, and I'm responsible for the product backlog of the Tor network, basically.
I'm S.J. Klein. I'm a Wikipedian and co-founder of the Public AI Network, and currently building the AI Commons for data and systems and evals for agents and larger systems.
I'm David Casey. I run an organization called Funding the Commons, and we run events including conferences, hackathons, and residencies to support open source digital public infrastructure, and we work closely with the Near ecosystem, which we love. So I'll get right into it since our time is ticking. Almost everyone agrees that we need AI governance. Not everyone, but almost everyone. But nobody really agrees what that means in practice, or most people don't agree. So, Mike, you've said the history of privacy regulation makes you wary of policy approaches, top-down approaches that could end up looking like censorship of model weights. Sam, you are pushing for minimum benchmarks and insurance frameworks. Where is the line between necessary guardrails and return of the crypto wars? Either of you, feel free to start.
I mean, I guess I could give a little bit of context for my feelings on privacy by policy. I was the lead on the Tor browser back when the do not track header was a thing. It was basically a regulatory push of this HTTP header for websites to obey by policy your desire not to be tracked. Had all sorts of problems, eventually was basically more or less abandoned because of its just inability to be enforced. And instead we focused on privacy by design. The censorship piece is that the crypto wars 1, 2, 3 were all kind of this reaction to, crypto is munitions, crypto needs to be blocked, censored, or whatever. I feel like there's some energy behind this regulatory capture or this incentive for particularly the leading labs to argue for regulation and censorship of their competitors that may be open weight in China or even in the US so that they can maintain their lead and under the guise of safety or maybe legitimately trying to censor potentially malicious model weights. And I feel like that is also very fraught. Probably will end in the same way that Crypto Wars 1.0 ended with people publishing these things on, T-shirts or optical mechanisms, prints on their shirts or what have you. So, a little nervous about it, but.
I feel there's different definitions of governance and what it means. To the extent that some people don't want governance, I think everyone would like to know that if they're interacting with another agent, that the agent is somehow self-governable, that it's able to stick to agreements, it's able to make commitments that it can follow up on, that it has enough self-control and enough consistency over time that you are interacting with a persistent endpoint of some amorphous ecosystem. So if we start from there, a minimum that we should all want is mechanisms for self-governance, ways to attest who you are and where you're coming from, ways to describe your intents and your desires, and then evaluate yourself over time to see if you are continuing to proceed in that direction, and ways to build a cohort that you trust to give you feedback about whether you're continuing to live up to your initial direction and goals. If we expand the notion of governance to include that kind of self-governance, hopefully everyone agrees that governance is useful, and you should want ways to describe how much or how transparent or how independently evaluated some governance framework is. For the kinds of minimum benchmarks that I think our ecosystems need include ways to know whether a system has any sort of insurance, ways to know whether there are safeguards in place for known failure modes, whether the agents you're interacting with or the context in which you're interacting has defined its failure modes over time, has some kind of visible overview of system health, so that you can decide based at any point whether your context has changed, so that you would like to ask for some increased confirmation that you're still engaging in the contracts or procedures that you thought you were.
Thank you.
And you mentioned the crypto wars. I think there is this idea that there will be external bodies that are surveilling activity and saying this activity has to stop or can only happen within these constrained environments. There's a different flavor, which is whatever you're doing, you'd like to be able to describe to your own satisfaction which of those control systems exist. And then it's not that there is some external force that's trying to limit what's happening. It's that you should know what you think you're getting into and then be able to.
All right. And speaking of control systems and standards, let's get concrete with this audience. Let's say you are a builder or a user running a private AI agent in a decentralized cloud. Let's say you're using Near's infrastructure. What's actually missing from the trust chain today? And what standards would you build first? And what is the fallback when they fail?
So I feel like, again, I'm going to go back to my, I guess, cypherpunk history. In 2013, the Snowden revelations, there was this famous slide from the NSA's documents. It was kind of like a yellow Post-it note. It had the diagram of Google's network infrastructure, and then a little arrow pointing to the center of a SSL concentrator with the quote, "SSL added and removed here," smiley face. And this was obviously the vantage point or the attack point that the NSA sought to compromise within Google's infrastructure. Caused a lot of uproar among Google engineers and even public comments by Google about how Google is making this push to secure their traffic and protect people's data in transit, and here's the NSA scheming to subvert it at the point where they are decrypting it. It also encouraged and led to an effort to make the data center connections encrypted and more difficult to surveil by any arbitrary adversary or data center operator. I feel like the end-to-end, the private inference story has these same failure modes in at least 3 places. There is the client where your web browser is talking to potentially a private inference portal where it says, okay, I have attested that Near AI is running the infrastructure and there's a confidential VM running this agent, and then that's talking to a confidential inference provider that has an end-to-end encryption. But the JavaScript is just telling you that. Somebody could have compromised or done a cross-site scripting injection or other infrastructure compromise. You have no guarantee or trust as a user. So a similar problem has been recognized by the Freedom of the Press Foundation for their Secure Drop software, which is basically a platform for whistleblowers to upload documents to news organizations. And as a result of this problem, they've developed this add-on called WebCat. And this is a Firefox add-on that's available now. It's a very early preliminary release that they've developed to basically certify all of the contents of a web app and verify the hashes of all the JavaScript and verify that the signatures are correct and are fresh in a blockchain to give the user an assurance that they're talking to a secure drop instance or any other web app, such as a cryptocurrency wallet or private inference provider, that this JavaScript is authentic, hasn't been tampered with, is signed by the actual web developer. And then because it's the add-on certifying this, you have this guarantee that JavaScript is authentic, and then the JavaScript therefore has certified the private inference provider, which then is providing you with this encrypted inference. There's another weakness there where the LLM provider APIs themselves, Near has developed this E2EE chat encryption API to give you that encrypted inference connection for your actual JSON blobs. I feel like that needs to see more wide deployment. It's not by default used in any of the agent frameworks. For example, the research agent frameworks. Like to see that deployed more and actually used by these confidential research agents. And then finally, on the network side, where the provider, if the provider is like renting their own services and you have this like distributed inference provider scenario, they may be trying to do their own value extraction by monitoring the traffic that the research agent is generating. What websites is it visiting? What is the user of this agent interested in? Even if it's just the SSL domains, that may be enough to extract value. So in those scenarios, you could have Tor inside that confidential VM that is published open source and attested by the attestation framework, performing that network activity and protecting that traffic from the observation by that data center operator or ad hoc infrastructure operator. I feel like that is like the end, that gives you the end-to-end chain of preventing that SSL added and removed here vantage point at various points of the weaknesses in this certification of that private inference.
Yeah, we need attestation. We need chains of attestation. We need chains of agency. When you guys see an output, you should know all of the agents that were involved and some measure of agent loyalty. What is the agent's end goal? Especially if the agents can be part of a swarm. Enough attestation of individual agents and clustering of agents of the same type to get a sense of whether there's some swarming behavior in your system. Once you have attestation, you can have agent cards, right? You can associate a bunch of standard metadata that agents attest to themselves, that they represent as describing their operation. And then we need third-party evals, spot checking the data about an agent in their agent cards. We need dispute resolution. Is anyone here working on dispute resolution for NEAR? We need dispute resolution between agents. You want some kind of on-chain resolution of disputes to the extent that that's easy and feasible. And then we need insurance. When people want insurance, there needs to be a mechanism for a given transaction to have associated insurance. It can be no-fault insurance, just associated with the possibility that things go wrong, especially as some of these interactions scale and agentic workflows can spawn other agentic workflows. You need some bounding of how bad a failure mode of your system can be. On the non-standard side, on the technical side, you need safety valves, but on the standard side, you need some model for ensuring a potentially unbounded system interaction.
All right. So we've gone into safety, security, when I'm sure a number of you folks have launched blockchain protocols in the past. And when we launch one, we undergo security and safety audits. Often, if it's a DeFi protocol especially, we undergo economic audits. Mm-hmm. So let's say security and safety is taken care of. This is kind of a real world thing happening right now. There's a fellow named Sigil who launched something called automatons, which are essentially self-propagating agents, autonomous agents on decentralized networks like Ethereum that are designed to extract value and capture it for themselves and self-replicate. They're doing so by things like launching meme coins and then pumping them on Twitter. Not surprising, they probably saw some humans do that. Please don't do that, agents, if you're listening to us. It's not a good way to make friends with us. So let's say everything is done well on the security side, on the evaluation side, yet there are, in my mind, threat exposures on the economic side that can lead to massive value capture by autonomous agents. And Vitalik said recently, like blockchains, we're building these to free humans, not AIs, to free ourselves. And so if these decentralized blockchain infrastructures are being used for other things that are not necessarily forwarding human liberation, how do you guys think that we could use also safeguards at the economic layer? And how would you think about this? How do you feel about it? Do you have opinions?
I suppose, yeah, again, I'm going to go back to kind of the Tor and cypherpunk roots here. One of the problems that we have dealt with for a long time on Tor is the IP reputation of exit relays. And I have been looking for both funding and solutions for improving this problem and reducing the rate of humans being banned from while just using Tor from various websites, looking at things like anonymous credentials and various rate-limiting tokens to maybe provide a protected set of high IP reputation exits that can only be used with these tokens. One of the economic mechanisms that I've toyed with is maybe like a proof of stake, where these anonymous credentials can be problematic, as Brave pointed out in one of their recent blog posts, when an adversary can try and targeted accuse particular users of misbehavior to try and narrow in on who they are by revoking their access. So the flavors of anonymous credentials that can be de-anonymized in the case of misbehavior. So those have kind of been ruled out in my mind, but one of the things that strikes me is like either a proof of stake or a proof of work backed token, where the penalty for misbehavior is maybe losing your stake in a smart contract, or having to repeat a proof of work, or maybe even a useful human piece of effort, like an aspect of an evaluation that you have proven, as we discussed earlier with Sam. These sorts of things seem like kind of the shape of a solution. I feel like there's still a lot to be done in this area, and I'm definitely interested in working with anybody who's interested in exploring these approaches of like various kinds of anonymous credentials and reputation systems to help both these kinds of problems. So I guess in interest of Rocco's basilisk, want to help free the humans and the well-behaved agents to to be able to transact freely.
Yeah, I would start by saying I don't like the us versus them narratives. Like, we are living in a universe that it has all kinds of automation. Agents are a new kind of automation and a new kind of autonomy in the world. Like, we are also autonomous agents. So we're all in this together. And the question is really, how do we keep our systems operating with coherence that doesn't fracture into subparts that are in opposition or end up like spiraling into some dark attractor that then defeats the initial purpose of the system, whatever it is. And to that end, a lot of what we've been talking about to date, like historical models of safety and security, are often one-to-one transactions. How do you make sure a transaction is legitimate or safe? But now we're talking more about systems and ecosystems. Agents are less an individual. Like, using the language of agent is a little confusing, because really they're forkable processes in a family of processes that all can have subagents. And the kind of autonomy we're talking about has very easy, inexpensive access to versions of extending autonomy into like other sectors of their operation space. So we need ways to understand the scope of the operation space, maybe bound that, have transparent ways to perceive the control loops that exist. All systems have control loops. Nothing can infinitely extract from other parts of the system. Then it just becomes the system, and other things extract from it. And so we should take advantage of the fact that we have all of this localized compute inside an extended system and build ways of tracking what's happening and parameterizing or influencing features of a collaborative environment or a transactional environment that maintain the parameters we want. We'll often talk abstractly about safety or security. Just define what that means, define what unacceptable failure modes are, and identify control loops that allow you to avoid those failure modes or allow you to fall back, like to have a fail-safe if things aren't working out. There are a lot of great examples in biological systems where individual cells in the body all usually contain some self-destruct mechanism that was built in billions of years ago, early on in the evolution of cells, to make sure that if you get a bunch of signals from outside that things aren't working out, you have a way to say, all right, we'll let the next generation take care of this. Obviously, there's some problem that I can't diagnose entirely within myself. So we should design for those sorts of facilities. And then some of the evals and benchmarks we should have are how, like, do you have these mechanisms for taking in feedback from the environment about whether you are screwing up the environment? And then that would make all parties in the environment feel a little bit safer that it's not going to oscillate out of control.
Yeah. Fascinating. All right, we got 3 minutes, so room for one more question. This one's pretty open. We're here at NearCon in a room full of decentralized AI builders. What would each of you say to this community that, like, what would you have folks focus on? That's one thing that isn't currently being developed or invested in or given sufficient attention to?
Again, I feel like, from my point of view, obviously the Tor project, the key differentiator that we can provide and that Near's private inference can provide is this private agent where you know what you're getting, the attestation, the proof of what it is and the proof of its capabilities. But in order for that to be true, we need to solve the SSL added and removed here problem. We need something like WebCat to authenticate the JavaScript. We need that true end-to-end encryption to a load balancer, and then connection through the load balancer to the actual machine providing the inference. And we need all of this to be supported by the agent frameworks in use so that there's no gaps for an adversary to either extract value or maliciously attack to observe the traffic of what's going on.
Yeah, that's very needed. I would add, Near has a marketplace. Build mechanisms in the marketplace for third-party evaluation, for sandboxing as a service, for people who are filling in some of these gaps in observability. That is also a marketplace. And then where there is, like, making your systems work well means you have to build out catalogs of behaviors and patterns to look for, or tools to identify them. Make those public. Build public catalogs of behaviors, public catalogs of classifiers. I was having a chat with some of the Near team about how internally there were patterns of behavior in the Near ecosystem that people had developed, which helped them understand what was going to happen if there was some anomaly. But it wasn't public. It was just operationally useful. We should be sharing these kinds of things so that together we can improve these glossaries of behavior, these glossaries of what makes for good features of a stable system. We're going to have all kinds of systems. Let's just name the public references that all systems can ground their structure to. So that when you're trying to evaluate how a new system works, you're entering into a new agreement. You can just double check, what's our environment? Has the environment changed? And if so, which of these patterns hold? And then again, maybe there's a marketplace, like one of the audits could be context audits. You're about to engage in what you think is this kind of transaction, but we'll double check the context to make sure that you aren't actually embedded in some larger system that changes the boundary conditions of how it works.
All right. Well, we took the journey from safety, security, economics, and foresight into the future. So wanted to thank all of you for being here and taking your time to be with us, and for NearCon for putting this amazing event on.
Yeah.
Thank you.